Welcome to Tech for Good with Bethnal Green Ventures. My name's Paul Miller, and I'm delighted today to be joined by Dhiraj Mukerjee, who's one of the co-founders of Shazam, but also a Tech for Good angel investor. So, hello, Dhiraj.
Hey, Paul, great to see you.
So let's start a little bit with your founder story at Shazam. How did building something, really so early in that mobile tech space, shape your outlook on innovation and impact?
Well, just for context, we started Shazam in 2000 when the world was a completely different place and sold it in 2018, which seems to be receding into the rearview mirror. And I think that certainly I had no intention to be ahead of the game when it comes to innovation, but that's the way it turned out. The mobile market was still relatively in its early days, and it took a long time before the mobile internet fully developed, and then much later when the iPhone launched and the App Store launched and everything changed. So I think the way that's shaped my perspective is that, it's okay to be out ahead. It's all right to think long term, and it's a game of patience. So yeah, overnight success didn't work out for us, but it was a character building experience to go through that journey.
And you've since done actually a range of different things, but one of the things that I've come across you doing is becoming a leading Tech for Good angel investor. Mm-hmm. What was it that drew you to Tech for Good in particular, or to the impact space when it comes to investing?
A great question, actually, because I was powerfully influenced by one of our investors when I was at Shazam. Al Gore was a partner at Kleiner Perkins, a big VC firm in the US. And he took an interest in this little company in their portfolio, and he came over and did a talk for us. And I remember the incredible impact his words had on me and my colleagues. And he talked about global warming, as it was known at the time, and his deep kind of dread about where the world was going and all the actions he had taken personally in terms of making a movie, The Inconvenient Truth, as well as, setting up an organization to rally people and build awareness. And that was a turning point for me. And I thought, wow, I've learned so much. I need to take this problem seriously. And there's a way to make a difference using the skills which I've built up as an entrepreneur. Then it just seemed like a natural place for me to apply my time and energy.
And now, when you're looking at investments, when you're meeting founders, what is it that you look for in that founder? Is sort of a particular way that you have of thinking about those people, and how do you spot that?
Yeah, I suppose I have my own scars from my entrepreneurial journey and the ups and downs, the near-death experiences. We were on the brink of bankruptcy several times along the way. And I think I know what it takes to make it through the hard times. And it's a level of resilience. It's a level of not taking no for an answer. It's being able to rally the troops and bring them along with you when, times are particularly tough. So I suppose it's pattern recognition for people who I believe have the character and the drive to make it through those tough points. And inevitably that happens with almost every startup. It's never smooth sailing in my experience. So I guess call it the tacit knowledge, but that's what I guess rely on.
Yeah. And I guess, the other side to it is the problems that they're working on. What real-world problems are you most excited to see tech addressing today, but I guess on the startup side and perhaps more broadly?
Yeah, I do have an active interest in climate action, and it's something which is close to my heart and probably will be, because I think it's a generational challenge. Climate tech is so diverse. It spans so many different things. It's really difficult to speak of it as a domain. It's more a sort of a cross-cutting theme, if you will. But more broadly, I invest across the Sustainable Development Goals because someone's done the hard work to think through a framework, and I'm in that sense cause agnostic. So I'll support any entrepreneur who's passionate about a cause which fits within that framework, broadly speaking. But the reality is that problems and challenges also change over time. And one of the things which I'm concerned about today, for instance, is data privacy, for instance. And there might be other themes which emerge in the future. So this is a long-winded way of saying that I don't take a sniper shot at a single cause or target, but more trying to support individuals who I believe can make a difference in their business to their cause.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the things we say at BGV is we think the entrepreneurs are closer to the problems in terms of understanding them and to some extent we're led by them teaching us things about the problems, rather than deciding at kind of, sort of 30,000 feet level what might be an issue
Yeah,
to solve.
I absolutely share your view. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And when you meet founders, which I'm guessing you're doing pretty regularly at the moment, what's one mistake or blind spot you see often? And have you got any advice, or how do you find yourself helping them through those things?
I guess that at Shazam, we always had problems with our business model. So we went through six or seven different business models trying to find one which worked. And that's a classic startup problem. And I see this in the impact space as well. And I think it takes time and effort to find one which can really stick. And there tends to be a cycle. So a lot of business will start out with a B2C vision. They might, pivot to B2B, or they might realize that actually it's government contracts, which makes more sense. But I think that trying to validate the business model as early as possible is never a waste of time. And one can have lots of activity and ideas and things which are useful, but I always advise to try to find the shortest path to validating the business model, having learned the painful way.
Yeah, and how do you think about that? Yeah, that commercial viability, if you like, when you've got deep social environmental purpose in the company. Is it a balance, or can you have both, or how do you think about that?
Well, in my experience, impact entrepreneurs are driven by the mission rather than driven by the money with a side helping of mission. And so that is generally fundamental. Then the question becomes, how do you make this business sustainable, which is what leads you to the commercial question and proposition. So the first one, it comes from the heart. If you're truly passionate about clean water, then that's fantastic. And there's usually a backstory, to that. It's not something which entrepreneurs pick out of a menu of good causes. But then the next question, which is, how do you raise the funding? How do you build a business? Those are conventional early stage startup questions, actions, ways of operating. And that's where my commercial experience, I guess, is relevant.
And is there something around kind of products? Because, thinking back, Shazam was an incredibly unusual product. I still remember the first time I used it. It sort of felt a little bit like magic the first time, as a SMS, I think, at the time.
Yes.
Is there something that makes like particular products stand out to you? Is there a sort of a sense of magic that you look for in those things?
Perhaps. And I think the way you described it is exactly right. Like, we wanted to capture that magical feeling. Even the name Shazam is intended to reflect that, if you will. And my business partner, Chris, was certainly influenced by Steve Jobs' philosophy of how do we make this as simple as possible? And originally it was a phone call to an IVR system, which would send you a text message, which was a terribly clunky experience. So my apologies to our early users. But once the App Store launched and it became just one big blue button which you can press, it was a much more delightful experience. I think that if you fast forward to today, what I'm seeing with some of the capabilities of Gen AI, for instance, feels equally, magical. And I think that there's an opportunity to capture that essence. And we're talking here about a B2C product, but I think the philosophy applies in B2B as well, which is, how do I remove friction? How do I make things super simple, super clear? How do I, address a pain point which might be hidden from a client or customer perspective, but when that product does its thing, then you go, you can feel the relief of your problem having been taken away. So I think that philosophy is still applicable, even though the domain might be quite different.
Looking at the UK and Europe, how well do you think we're supporting those sort of purpose-led founders at the moment? There's obviously the contrast with the US as well, and I don't know whether you've got a view as to where it's better to be a purpose-led founder at the moment. But also, I guess I'm interested in what you think could improve.
Well, I'm really, I guess, positive about the environment in the UK, and I think that Bethnal Green Ventures is a great example of being a big kind of promoter of the ecosystem. But even beyond that, I'm a member of an angel group called Untitled, which was convened by Dees Chennai. There's dozens and dozens of angels from lots of different backgrounds across the world, supporting women and minority-led startups in this particular case. Even in the UK, I see active networks of angels focusing on specific issues like climate action, for instance. And I do see lots of support the community, the help, and slightly tangentially, but important as well, movements like the B Corp, and putting a stake in the ground about being a company which stands for a particular mission. I'm certainly very upbeat. That is not to say there aren't challenges, but I think it's a fantastic environment here in the UK.
Okay, that's really good. Do you think the next level, or sort of the next, I guess, sort of really big, valuable company, I mean, the sort of level of a Shazam, will it look very different from the startups we see today? Or, what's your hunch, if you like, about the kinds of companies that BGV might be backing, that you might be backing, that will be, important in the future?
I think that it's difficult to name a stellar impact company today, and maybe this is just my ignorance, but I think that things change not incrementally, but can be all of a sudden. And I think what will happen is that if we look back in 5 or 10 or 15 years from now, it'll be a completely different conversation. So take an example, like electric vehicles, for instance. I think the adoption and rollout has been slower than hoped for a number of reasons. And I'm one of the early adopters or early customers, and I've been a bit frustrated and disappointed that we haven't shifted more quickly to electric vehicles. But when it happens, I think we won't look back. I think it's just going to be a sudden shift. And I'm not talking about that domain specifically, but about, sort of like tentpole companies which change the world, that consumers or businesses think about their environment, and we'll be able to say at startup X or look at big company Y. That's the way to do it. Those pathfinders, I don't feel we're quite there yet, but I'm very optimistic we will be there in the next decade.
Okay, that's great. And finally, if someone listening is building a tech for good venture at the moment, what's one piece of advice that you'd want to leave them with? I guess based on your experience, both as an entrepreneur, but also you've seen quite a lot of stories evolve now as an investor.
Yes, I think that inevitably, despite the wishful thinking, these businesses take time to build, and it's very difficult to build a long-term sustainable business within one cycle. So you'll have ups, you'll have downs, you'll have pivots which you didn't really anticipate. The winds will go from tailwinds to headwinds for no obvious or predictable reason. And I think to stay the course and to, get through those difficult times, unfortunately, is just part of the deal. And so that would be my advice to today's generation of entrepreneurs, which is when times are good, it's tough. When times are bad, it's super tough. But that's what I think it takes to, create a legacy. And I will always be a cheerleader. I will always be a supporter for those entrepreneurs who are willing to play that long game.
I'll stick with it. Sounds like the advice. Yes. So, Dhiraj, thank you so much for joining us today on Tech for Good, and really hope to stay in touch. If you've got suggestions for guests or topics we should be covering on Tech for Good, do get in touch. And if you're thinking of starting a Tech for Good venture and looking for investment, don't forget to check out bethnalgreenventures.com to see whether we might be able to help. That's it for this week. Thanks for listening, and goodbye.
Thanks a ton, Paul. Take care. Bye.